that's unrelated to their work? Unrelated to their work.
Well,
Unrelated to their sales work, let's
well,
say.
no, I just like, I like knowledge, and I like being what I call a thought leader.
A thought leader.
It doesn't necessarily really have anything to do with my work, it's just whatever interests me.
Okay.
I want to get to the edge, in terms of understanding.
Okay, so in doing so, and acquiring that knowledge and thinking on that knowledge and being aware of that knowledge and mindful, etc., where do you place yourself? Not that it's a competition, but where do you place yourself, the you now doing it on your own versus the you if you went into the only college that was nearby, wherever you lived in the United States, and they just said, this is the curriculum and this subject, this is what we want you to do. How do you feel that compares, the knowledge you might have gotten here versus the knowledge that you pulled in on your own?
I think it varies. I mean, I think my interest is more in terms of like when I'm outside of an academic environment, but for me it's more like a mastermind where I'm learning from other people, they're learning from me, and they have a different perspective. I love arguing with people, not like fighting, but
Debate.
yeah, but just to get that other side, and so I think that's what I crave the most. So when you say community, I think of like the mastermind, where you have several people talking and coming from different experiences.
My suggestion by bringing this topic up is that I think that we've gone overboard with certification and degrees. If you go back a few generations, you had people who could build a barn. And one of the ways they learned to build a barn was by their neighbors working from age 10 with their neighbors, their uncles, their father, mother, this type of thing. How did they learn to cure meat? How did they learn to hunt? They did it all on the job for the most part. They were illiterate. And their illiteracy didn't mean that they were ignorant or stupid. That just meant they couldn't read things that were in a book or write things down that they had in their mind. But calling those people imbeciles is not very smart, because look at the things that they've built over the course of history. Look how they've survived in the wild. Does anybody think that they could last 3 months in the wild based on what they have in their home? Like, let's say you put one backpack on your back and you last 3 months in the wild. Does anybody think they could pull that off? I'm going to pick a hard place in Manitoba, Canada. Not one person in here.
3 days.
3 days? Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. And then Giardia. Think about the rivers. I mean, even natural, you can go back 10,000 or a million years, and if you don't know how to handle Giardia, an animal dies in the river or somebody upstream defecates in the river, you may have a Giardia, some other bacteria situation, and now you're an able-bodied person, all of a sudden you're lumped over like this. Like, the last time I was like that, I had a hernia operation. And I swear to God, at age 22, I felt like an old man because I was walking like this. That's a hard one. And so that's what you would have been. So if you're in your village with your people trying to survive, you're in deep trouble when you have that. So that brings me to my next point, which is, how did people learn to stretch? And this is just something I pulled out of my head. Anybody have any idea how they learned to stretch? I don't know if it's accurate, it's just the thought that came to me.
Watching animals?
Yeah.
Animals. Isn't that unbelievable? How does an animal wake up a cat? They do a big stretch. Now, if you go back to the roundup days of the West and the South, when they're bringing the cattle to Chicago, you're on this roundup for several weeks, right? If you're stiff at the end of the 8-hour ride, what are you going to do when you get off there? You're a 25-year-old, 45-year-old person. Are you going to want to be like that on the roundup? Or what are you going to do? You're going to go out and find something where you can hang yourself, you can pull, stretch. You're going to do it. This is one stretch that I really like. This is a hamstring stretch. So you just lean over and the leg comes up. And so that's so easy. The one that you're down on the ground where you have to reach for it, that's so hard. Use your body weight. Over and the leg comes up, and I'm getting the stretch here, and it's just a piece of cake. Then we do the other side. And you just relax into it. And so hallelujah, that's the way I think they would have done it. They would have done things that are sensible. Anytime I learn something from someone who I consider a master, I say, does anybody else know that to these masters? Does anybody else know that healing technique or that martial arts technique? They've usually told me, because it's so effective, somebody had to have used that before, because it's natural that you go towards the effectiveness of something. So let me go through a couple more points and then we can do some exercises. The humans live in their heads. One of the reasons we live in our heads is because we have high-functioning brains that acquire knowledge. They're just an amazing thing. And so we hang out there. We're comfortable with that. If we were 2 or 3 generations ago, or we're in a country now that's doing a lot of manual labor, we would feel very confident with our picking up ability, our handling of tools ability, our hunting ability, what have you. So we tend to go with what we're really good at. And so when you go through school for those many years, you learn to use your head to think through things and get A's, B's, C's, and D's, etc. That's one of the things. Second thing I put down here is why chimps, unlike humans, are able to reach independence by age 5. Anyone have a suggestion on that? So if you study anthropology, you will learn that these chimps at age 5, they don't leave their parents, interesting, but they can survive without their mother or father around. And how come they can do that and humans can't? Well, we've got this brain that is much more complicated. So that's the difference between the chimp and the human. They have skills that we don't have. They can scale a tree like lightning. No human can do that. No human can go up that quick, and that's how fast a chimp can go up a tree. But we have a brain that has many more firing electronic apparatuses than monkeys do, and that's why we have such an ability to grow knowledge. The problem is, for humans, it takes a long time to get those brains where they need to be. And so you're 18, 20 years of age before you can survive on your own. Maybe in years gone by, there were hunter-gatherers who got lost or their family was wiped out by something. They might have survived at 13 or 15. But if you go to 6 or 8, real hard to survive on your own. It's not just size of body. A lot of it has to do with brain functionality and acquired knowledge. Those are some things that I would suggest. So I mentioned the outdoor fitness as Zen. So we don't have the coffee, cigarettes, or cell phones at that early morning process. As soon as you have commotion come into that, it's no longer, in my opinion, a Zen experience. However, I have my mind opened by people who've been to Mumbai, Bombay, India. There's so many people that if you do have a little bit of space wherever you are, and you are a person like I am, and you wanted to do some movement activities, there are people all around you, there's noise, there's taxis, there's what have you, and so you just do your movement right there. That's your only option. So those people have adapted to that. The people in Japan, years ago I learned that they have 1/3 the population, this is 25 years ago, 1/3 the population of the United States, all living in the square footage of Montana. So that's amazing. So they make it work, right? They make wellness work. They're more long-lived than Americans are, so they make it work. So there's ways to adapt. The preference for me would be to have a lot of space and not as many people when I'm doing this exercise and this grounding routine. So the next point on there is staff acupressure. Does anyone know what staff acupressure means? So Dr. Hesu just worked on me. What were you using, your thumb when you were hitting some trigger points?
Yeah.
So your thumb. So the man behind the camera today is Andre, and he was out there with me today, and we have to find some better sticks. This is a substandard stick. And we were out at Mackenzie Park. We were doing some acupressure before we began exercising. So what I do is, this is a Northern California stick. I'm still looking, so if you folks run across straight sticks, James in the back purchased one online, so you can take a look at his stick as well. But this is what I use for hiking, for exercises. So I do one that's like this. So I'm keeping the hips square, and I'm pulling all these abs, these side abs, which would be more like, recall, coil. So if you got hit by a shield and you were a gladiator, you'd be able to handle that, and your spine, your inner spine here, all the structure that support this move is getting strengthened, and you get the abdomen area as well. So I'm curled in like this. I'm not extended, curled in, flexed, and so I'm doing an exercise with all of this. So I'm not suggesting you go out and you try this one right now, because it's a little bit of a popping, stopping sensation, almost a violent sensation, but you could start out doing little ones like this, And then as you're comfortable, you feel this working, your spine health is good. You know, you could ask Hesu about your spine health before you do it, and what stretches you might want to do. You can do these types of things, but then when you get going, you can really stop it, and you're doing something completely different than your normal ab crunches and leg lifts and those types of things. So that's one that I learned doing martial arts over in Spain. He taught me that one, and I thought that was pretty cool. Sometimes people look at you, these masters of martial arts, they look at you and they see my build, you know, gangly build. What do I need? I need more stability. I don't need flexibility. I've got too much flexibility. So they're doing things that are keeping me more compact. My golf pro, the same thing. Don't over swing and be loose. Get more compact and stable on that hip and swing that way. So the masters really know how to teach you, so you have to find masters, and maybe you as parents or confidants of your friend and your expertise, you pass on those gems of wisdom to them as well. And that makes life very special. So the gem of wisdom in 1986, I learned, is called acupressure. So just like Dr. Hesu uses his thumb, and some people use elbows, maybe their palm, and they're pressing on trigger points, and they're releasing fascia and parts of your muscle, taking pressure off of nerves, all these wonderful things, and enhancing the blood flow to clean out lactic acid. The list is long. In America, guess to whom we did acupressure first, racehorses or humans in a large scale? Racehorses. Yeah, racehorses since the first days of racehorses. They knew that if they took, you know, a stick or an elbow or anything they could put pressure on the shoulder area or wherever that horse needed it, that they were having winning horses, and that made them a lot of money. And then eventually, chiropractics and massage became very popular, not just for athletes or famous people, but regular people are going to do that. And that's probably been since the late 80s that it's become popular. So what I do with this guy is I put him against the wall or a set of stairs or a tree, and then I just put a towel over this end, and I lean back against it and hit all the trigger points of my body. And so learning those trigger points is something that came to me very easily. I would say that the young lady I spoke about who learned my fitness and regimen, she became a black belt in 4 months of doing what I consider the wellness way for me. And when I was shown how to do acupressure without a stick by a doctor up in Sacramento back in '86, in 2 weeks I was as good as he was. So he said, "You got it." And he said, "Now you go out and you teach other people how to do this." I've been doing this since '86, 3 mornings minimum per week when I'm injured, 5 or 6 or 7. Take a guess how many people I've seen doing public acupressure in a park, beach, what have you, with a stick since 1986. 0. Take a guess how many people at work and at school I've seen popping ibuprofen in that time.
Countless.
Countless. That's the word I was looking for, countless. So that to me shows that we're not clued in on a lot of things that are easy, free, and natural. It's just so natural to be able to relieve tension. What do the chimps do with their downtime? Anybody remember what the chimps do to each other? They're grooming and picking bugs off all the time. I mean, what a bonding scenario. Women, one of the big things that I've learned from some psychologists is that the poor women who are in the workforce, this time in 2015, in the last 20 years, is the time in known history where we've lived on alone, on our own, single house or a one-bedroom apartment, whatever. More people living on their own than any time in the known history of the world. Men don't do well with that scenario, but women, they can handle it, you would think, in terms of their disposition, but inside, it's tearing them apart. Women, the bonding that they used to do in the gathering, and even the hunting, but men typically were hunters. Men could go off on their own and hunt, or be in a small group like the wolves hunt, but the women in their gathering and caretaking and all these things, it's a natural way of living, and internally the psychologists are telling me that it's really hitting women hard, and that's a tough thing. And it's a tough thing for the men who are trying to help them, but we often can't help them because they are bonding creatures and they need to be around other women. So how do you adapt through that? I don't have the answer. I'm willing to hear points of view. So another exercise you can do with this guy is you can do lunges. Now in the typical gym, you often see people doing lunges without any support. I really like lunges, and I'm fit 365 days a year, but I don't want to do lunges and pull something. And I don't want to do lunges that are hard. So what's wrong with doing this? You know, in a stable grass or a stable parking lot. What's wrong with doing that? And then mixing it up so you're doing turning, you know, little turning exercises, just playfully figuring out what your body needs. So time equals mastery. That's most of the cases. Sometimes something you'll master instantly, Microsoft Word, in my case acupressure, a lot of the healing stuff, it just made sense to me. Maybe in a former life, that's what I was about, but it made sense very quickly. You know, some people pick up the piano and they're a concert pianist by the age of 10 or 12. So how do they learn that, right? So you go out and you spend some time. If you're not mastering this easy, you do the playfulness and you just get into this thing and you work and you see what makes sense. You don't just do something that's on a video. You have to adapt it to your own personal body, your own prior injuries, these types of things. So those are some of the things that I would suggest that you consider doing. And the reason I brought this out is because we went from the 1960s when I was a kid and the 1930s when my dad was a kid, we went to performance-oriented and weight loss-oriented and functional-oriented gyms, indoor gyms. Whereas nobody, when my dad was a kid, was going in an indoor gym. In high school, they didn't have weights in my dad's high school in New Jersey. And they had a pool, and then they had fields and basketball courts, and they had exercises on the ground, but there was no weight training whatsoever. There were no machines. They had a pull-up bar. They might have had a pegboard, but that was a friendly competition and playful. You know, so-and-so's good at this, so-and-so's good at running, so-and-so's, I was a high school manager in football my freshman year because I certainly wasn't big enough to play. I had the best time of my life watching these big, strong athletes and laughing with them about their skills, and I was clowning around, and the other managers and I would play football, touch football, where they're out creaming each other, you know, coming in like this and having to take baths and Epsom salt, and we didn't have ibuprofen when I was in high school, but we had other things, you know, we had that atomic balm salve. It was like a very strong Bengay. But these guys were consistently injured, but they got to wear their varsity jackets and they got to play with all the endorphins and euphoria, and it was a lovely thing. And I got to participate in all that energy just by being a manager, so I thought that was cool. So I'm holding this, and I'm saying to be playful. If you're not playful, how are you going to last from now until the end of your days on this planet? So playfulness is huge. Dr. Hesu, you're into surfing, correct? Mm-hmm. And you play with your son out in the waves, I'm guessing. Yeah. Anything you want to share on playfulness versus just being a performance and a strength athlete in the gym? Is anything, a gem of wisdom that makes sense to you out of that discussion?
Well, people tend to do a lot more physical activity if they don't realize they're exercising. You know, but when I went to Hawaii and I was working out in gyms, I mean, I'd never been to a place where I was like the smallest, like the least well developed. I mean, because I was a gymnast and a swimmer, and I went to Hawaii and these guys are just surfing for hours, and their bodies blew me away. You know, so a lot of women love to dance, you know, and you know, those are the forms of exercise that they're doing a lot of exercise without realizing they're exercising. And, you know, I think fun is, you know, the key.
Recreation is the word that I love to use. For some people, they recreate in the gym, and that's okay. But in my estimation, it's less than 1% of the population, even in 2015, who are able to recreate in the gym. Well, for a lot of people, it's dragging themselves into the gym, going into a cardio kickbox class, a spinning class. I've done spinning a few times. I think it's wonderful, and I love physical activity. I would have a very difficult time being in a spinning class 3 days a week with the rah-rah and the being sedentary on that bicycle and breathing in the same air that everyone else is breathing. I think the outdoors is something that changes just a little bit every day. It's just a little bit different. Another thing on the list is being grounded. I'm guessing we're not grounded to the earth because this is something that's insulating us from the voltage of the earth. But has anybody heard about grounding and earthing? You have.